Hey guys, Margaret Adele here with another video. I wanted to do this one for a while and I just had to kind of wait for the right time when I didn't have one of the million end of year, beginning of year videos or wrap ups or any of that kind of thing. This is my list of my 5 or 4, depending on how you look at it, sci-fi pet peeves. Now for the longest time I thought that I didn't like sci-fi. I don't know why. My father was a Trekkie, so in actuality, being into sci-fi would be quote-unquote in my genes. But for the longest time, I kind of shied away from it until I decided to get into it not too long ago, just to try. And actually, when I really liked it, I figured out what kind of sci-fi, anything that takes place in like a spaceship or a space station, I found out. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized what I was struggling with wasn't necessarily the entire genre, but pet peeves within the genre. And these are pretty prevalent, so it's gotten to the point where I kind of just have to ignore it when it pops up. But I thought I'd give you guys the list and see how many times you can spot it in the sci-fi you read. So first up, number 1 is what I like to call the sci-fi sentence. This sentence will usually happen very early on in the book, the first chapter, if not the first couple pages. And this sentence is basically meant to say, look, sci-fi, world building, we have it all. This usually will involve multiple different words for things that you have no idea about. They went through the 13th quadrant of the Andromeda Galaxy in their Viper 319 spacecraft circa, they'll just start throwing out all this information in the span of one sentence. Now, this is a horrible way to get any genuine information across. The more and more strange terminology you throw into a single sentence, the less the person will understand. So you could throw all these words in, like that sentence I just said, but all the person is going to think is, all right, they're flying through space in a kind of old spaceship. Done. That is all of the information that has been imparted as a result of that sentence that is chock full of all these words. And so you really haven't actually given any information to the person. If anything, you've made the entire book feel less like they would want to read it. It becomes more of an uphill climb trying to get into this book because right then and there you've thrown all this information and they have to kind of grapple with it right from the get-go. Now, if you want to explain something like that, that's fine. You have to space it out. Explain what the 14th quadrant is, explain what the Viper spaceship is, what have you. So that one sentence should actually take one paragraph. It should be 3 or 4 sentences to give a little bit of this is what this is, this is what this is, this is what this is. And to just throw it all together kind of gives this what is supposed to be a, look, world building a sci-fi, but what comes across as very pretentious, look at all of this, you don't know what any of this is, but I do. And for me, it's like, no, if you want me to understand this, you have to actually explain it, because none of those words are going to stick in my head beyond reading that sentence. My brain will translate it into its generic counterpoint, so I'll know about what I'm working with, spaceship in space, okay, and nothing else in that sentence matters. So that is definitely one of my top pet peeves. Looking off my list. Number 2, how do I explain this? I have this down as unexplained alienness. This is when characters are given random alien attributes for no apparent reason. Now, this doesn't count for your cantina scene or your marketplace scene or any scene where the main character is walking through a place that has a lot of aliens, but it doesn't really necessarily matter to go into depth. In that instance, those aliens aren't really characters so much as they're set pieces. If you're not going to be including them in the story in any real way, then no, you don't have to explain it. But what I'm referring to is when you have a character in a story that's like decently involved in the story and they have some random extra feature that isn't explained. That makes no sense because you can explain the reason for why every part of the human body looks the way it does. From everything on our face, to our hands, to our legs, everything, you can explain it from a survival evolutionary nature. And it would make sense that you have the same for aliens. Even if you just say that, oh, this was vestigial from a previous time when their species did this, they were, the species once actually kept headbutting each other. And so they do have giant horns now because That's vestigial. They don't headbutt each other anymore, but evolution hasn't caught up, so they still have giant horns. Something. Everything should have some reason, some actual pragmatic purpose for why that appendage is on their body or why it's that. Now, the only argument here is you can say skin color, because I know that there are other actually skin tones that are better with taking in or putting out light. So you could say that, for instance, that there's different skin colors. You don't have to maybe not explain that as much, but the other things you can't just throw. I think someone said that there was a book where like a dude just randomly had webbed feet for no apparent reason. Did he come from an aquatic planet? Did he have duck ancestors? Like that kind of thing. There needs to be a point. There needs to be a reason why this alien has this particular appendage. Number 3 and number 4. They kind of go together, but you can also count them as kind of different. Number 3 is homogeneous planetary culture. And that's a very fancy way of saying when the writer talks about the whole planet as if it is one singular culture with one singular language. They all believe the same religion, all that kind of stuff. Now I want you to think about Earth, the entirety of Earth. Name the entire religion of Earth with the entire culture and the entire language. Now we have a majority English, majority, yes, I think still majority Christian, although Islam is catching up. We have a majority, but by no means is Earth one homogenous culture. There's just too much space, even in this day and age where you can talk to someone across the world like that. There are still very different cultures. If anything, the internet is forming its own microcultures. You know, the culture of Instagram is different than the culture of Twitter, is different than the culture of Tumblr or Reddit. So this idea of this entire planet being one singular culture throughout makes no sense. Now, you could argue that, oh, this is the majority culture, this is the dominant culture, this country on this planet has dominated the entire planet, and so they are putting forth their culture as singular, but everyone understands that there's other cultures there. That would make more sense. But in the sci-fi that says, all of this entire planet-sized, culture, all one culture, all the same language, all the same religion, everything, all the same, just doesn't work. Now, this one I will ignore often because the sheer amount of world building that would have to go into giving every single planet its own culture would be a bit much. So this one is the one I'll usually give a pass on. Although it is fairly easy to be like, oh, this is the culture of the dominant peoples of this planet. The planet is so uninhabitable, like 90% of the planet is uninhabitable, but only this tiny percent of the planet is actually lived on, so that it is only one country's worth of land that people actually live on, or if they call themselves people. That way it could work. There are ways you can make it work where it still seems believable that the culture is presented in the story as mostly homogenous, while understanding that the entire planet can't possibly be the same culture. And number 4, related to that, is when an entire planet has one single leader. That goes right into it of who would be able to control an entire planet, one person. Like, who would agree to this? How can one single administration possibly control the entire thing? Like, maybe a single person in control of, like, an asteroid, or like what do they call Pluto now? A dwarf planet? I don't know. But like if it was a very smallish space, maybe. But again, if we're talking like an Earth-sized planet, that's way too much space for any one person to control. So now it looks like, is this purely is this an actual active administration position? Or is this purely a figurehead? Or a council representative to an interplanetary council? That one will make a little bit more sense, because in that instance, they're more ambassador than actual leader of the entire place. But that's kind of goes into the last one, where the entire planet being summed up so succinctly with one culture or one person. Not my most favorite. Number 5, and this one has been brought up by many people before. But I think it's usually only brought up in one direction, when you could also switch it and say the other opposite is true. And that is when aliens just look like hot humans, but kind of different. Now this has been brought up a lot in talking about how a lot of sci-fi has portrayed alien females as being just hot women with blue skin, or, you know, maybe some slight scales or something, how they tend to be very hot models that are called aliens. However, I can also argue that the reverse is true. I have read a decent amount of sci-fi romances where there are male aliens that are basically just hot dudes that may have some rough skin, may have blue skin. Usually the skin is slightly different, but they still have abs, they still have chiseled jaws and smoky gaze. It's still only 2 eyes. You can't lovingly look into someone's eyes if they have 3 of them or 1. So this goes both ways. Now, obviously, I'm not saying every alien in the sci-fi should be totally weird and be amorphous blobs or cyclopses with claws or what have you, but statistically, if they come from a planet where, you know, maybe the reptiles were the dominant species that evolved, they're not going to look just like us when we came from a different branch of the evolutionary tree. So that kind of humans but hot, so that they're different, but they're not too different that when they start making out with humans, it'd get weird. Because you always got to keep in mind the making out with humans part. You always got to keep in mind the romances. You always got to keep in mind, will this alien look weird having sex with a human? Which, admittedly, is probably what a lot of the romances are thinking, and it's probably the forefront of a sci-fi romance author's thought, is they can be alien, but they still can't be weird in possible sex scenes. So, that's it, my 5 sci-fi pet peeves. And like I said before, at this point, for the most part, I can ignore them and accept that this is just kind of part of the entire genre. Every genre has their pet peeves, and I might move on. I might do this again with my biggest fantasy pet peeves or my biggest romance pet peeves. I have a lot of those. Or biggest pet peeves of fiction in general, the things that tend to pop up in books that I'm not that big of a fan of. But if you have any sci-fi pet peeves, please put them down in the comments below. If you know any books that actually don't do any of these things that are sci-fi, I would love to get the title. Please give me those in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.